I'm agree. There are I want to compliment staff. They are timely emailed out. Everybody has a chance to read them before the meeting. And then when we say to vote on the minutes, I think that's the time to bring up if you think something should or should not be in it, right?
Well, I think as a practical matter, legally, the minutes only have to include decisions that were made. But we are trying to do more than the bare minimum on the legalities of it. And
Yes.
therefore, and I got no problem with that. What I'm getting frustrated with is it seems like every meeting is about why we can't do anything. And that's discouraging to participation. And it just, the record reads as if we're a bunch of idiots for even having proposed to do anything. And it's frustrating. But I'm not saying those folks didn't say all those things. I'm just saying it's really disappointing that we aren't making any progress and we're focused on what we can't do. And if people really believe in recycling like they say they do, why aren't they coming up with some more ideas? So at least Bruce came up with an idea today. Thank you, Bruce.
I think ever since we've gone.
You're welcome.
I think ever since we've gone to this format where we're doing Zoom meetings, the minutes aren't as detailed as we're normally accustomed to. I agree with Bob in that manner. But I understand the challenge of going from a recording or a video to paper. And if we want to keep it to the basic motions and votes, that would be fine. But I think it's important to have as much of the meeting captured in the minutes as possible.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to follow up on your comment on Build Back Better and also ask you a question about the pandemic. You said that you're confident you can pass big chunks of Build Back Better this year. Does that wording mean that you are thinking about, you're looking at breaking the package up into?
Who is that?
Hey, Bruce, sorry, I think you need to go on mute. We can hear the TV behind you.
All right, with those comments and concerns heard, do we want to make an amended motion or do we want to vote on the motion that's on the table?
Actually, I think one of the reasons to capture more than what we legally have to is that in part, it shows we've done some diligence. It shows we haven't made decisions off the seat of our pants and that we have had people talk to us. And I personally don't have trouble with us having more information than just our votes.
And I support that, Sandra. I don't mean to, I'm just trying to bring it up for context, but I am thinking that lots of people, we have a hard time recruiting regular citizens. And if this committee only ends up being the people who have a vested interest in the outcome, it's not really achieving its goal. And I think it's getting very discouraging to have to listen to a whole bunch of reasons why we can't do anything every meeting. We're not getting anything done. So I would like to see.
I don't see it that way at all. I see us coming up with an end product that is doable because people tell us things and we're flexible. We make changes. And I think we'll come up with something that is supported by a larger number of people. I don't agree with you that we're not getting anything done.
Well, I hope you're right, but I can't think of a single thing we've done since we resumed our work. Like, all we do is listen to why we don't know what we're talking about.
To kind of take this, I know that discussion, it can go on. I think that standpoint, I think that what we're going to do is make sure that we're getting the minutes to be as accurate a reflection of what was discussed. If people have an issue or they have a concern that something was missed or something is inaccurate, call it out to us and let us make those changes or go back to investigate the video. So, I mean, I think that's the way that minutes are supposed to work. And I think that's what we should do.
Again, we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion necessary? If not, those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Karen, could you pop up the agenda, please, on the,
I will do so here really quick. Karen. Everybody see that?
next item on the agenda, residential and C&D subcommittee? Is that correct, Pete?
That's correct. So this is Sandra, and Sandra, as this committee requested, I am ready to present on the residential campaign.
Thank you.
So do you want to preference or kind of give an update, and then I can do that, or how do you want
Well,
to?
actually, it may feel sometimes like we don't get anywhere on our committee, but we've actually done quite a bit because we have looked into a variety of things, and it will allow us to come up with by the time something comes to the advisory committee, it will have been vetted in a number of different directions, and we'll feel very comfortable with what it's doing. I think the expanded marketing campaign is really well done by staff, and I would hope that they'd tell you all of the good things they've been doing.
Excuse me. So, given that, I want to give you a little bit of a presentation. You should have received the document this afternoon. I apologize for it being the same day, but it has it's a short week for us due to the holiday, plus a very short time frame to get something like this to be pulled together. Even though it doesn't seem like a lot of work, it's only a few pages. It actually is a lot of work. So what we want to do is kind of present on that document, and it's the expanded marketing campaign for recycling and composting residential. And to kind of go back to what that means is from the study recommendations, it's a residential education campaign to promote recycling and composting through websites, newsletters, yada, yada. And it wants to depend upon proven principles of community-based social marketing to include images, standardized terms used on materials. We want to make sure that we hit youth education, partnership with schools, outreach efforts to engage homeowners associations, multifamily properties, and neighborhoods through a resident champion program. And hopefully we're going to get some pretty good diversion annually from this program. So what the committee has talked about and staff has talked about is a branded campaign called Put Waste in Its Place. And this campaign is intended to impart an overarching message about putting stuff where it belongs instead of just throwing it away, because you hear people say all the time, yeah, we just throw it away, you know, whereas we want to get to a different state of mind that if it's recoverable, we should put it where it's recoverable. And we would want to have this Waste in Its Place campaign so that it can be tailored to individual recommendations or initiatives where it can make an impact. And that could include litter, putting waste in its place. You know, litter is a big issue. So as far as the overarching campaign, putting litter where it belongs. Illegal dumping could be putting recyclables in the recycling container, or it could be not putting contamination in recycling containers. It can be having recycling services at your home, or using drop-off facilities. It can mean a lot of things, but the overarching campaign is to be able to put waste in the right place. And that's what we want to do. So to get started with this, what we're looking at is setting measurable goals and baselines, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, and then matching it with what we have going on and create new ones. Then hiring a marketing firm to supplement and amplify that message and officially create the brand. And just as always, we want to make sure that this is it needs to include everybody in the stakeholder process. Our system here in Jefferson County is very complicated. You have so many different methods of who gets what services. So we're going to have to be thinking outside of the box. So staff has kind of put together some places that we would start that would complement the residential marketing campaign and some of the initiatives. So I'll just kind of quickly go through some of these. Reduced bagged recyclables in curbside recycling containers. Why is that important? It's because bagged recyclables might not necessarily get recyclable because it goes through the sorting facility and it might not get pulled out. It might get pulled out because it's tangled up in the bags. Just by getting getting the material out of the bags, we may capture more recyclables. Reduce the number of households having contamination in their recycling containers. So those first two, we're talking about a 25% improvement from first to last tagging. What we're talking about is the Recycle Right pilot program that we've been conducting, and something that I'm going to present on here in just a little bit, because we want to take it out of the pilot phase and put it into an actual program phase. And we'll be making a request to the to the board for funding to do that. So those are the first two, and that would come under that Recycle Right program. The third is reduce
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
When you say goal and it's got 25% for the reduced bag and 25% for reduced whatever it is number of households, what does that mean? 25% improvement?
25% improvement from first to last tagging for each survey area. So for every area that we go and do this tagging, we keep metrics on how many people are putting recycling in bags. And but we do education, and then we come back on the last tagging and we want to see how many people have stopped that.
Okay, so like if you had 500 people in your survey, 100 people were putting it in bags. At the end of your thing, you'd want only 75 people to be putting it in a bag.
Yeah, we want a 25% improvement.
Reduction in that. Okay.
Obviously, we want more, but that's our goal.
Thank you. Okay.
Should you have a time element on it, or does it not matter?
Typically, we would want a time on it, Sarah Lynn, but because we're going from survey to survey, I think it's going to be over in a matter of 3 months anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
Alongside. The next one is reduce yard waste and curbside garbage collection containers. We already know that there's a lot of yard waste in the garbage stream that shouldn't be there. We haven't built that out, but that is right up the alley of this Recycle Right program. So that is something that we would be building out. Increased capture of targeted recyclable materials. And we haven't got a goal for that yet, but we will be proposing what's called a capture rate study. And it would be, the capture rate is, and I'll get into a little bit more detail. Let me just wait until I get to that, but we haven't got to that set a goal and stuff like that quite yet. Increase curbside recycling rate to 22%. By 2028, there's our date. We're currently sitting at 17.5%. Increase curbside recycling availability and participation rate. We're at 39.8. We want to get to 80%. That's a huge jump, but that is kind of in line with what the study recommends. And we also realize that we have some work to do on this metric because really should be two different. It shouldn't be shouldn't be availability and participation rate. It should be an availability and then a participation rate. It should be two different because it is totally different. So there's work to be done there. Increased sale of home composters. And we're working on a better metric number, but this was one of our goals. And, that's to promote home composting. Increase the number of active no waste ambassadors. And this is important for us to expand our reach. And Karen and her team has a new class up going. Last year was the initial. I think they have 9 active ambassadors now. We want to continue to expand that program. And then lastly, we want to reduce the amount of yard waste collected in the yard waste stream and the garbage collection stream. So overall, we want people to handle their material at home. We would measure that through the existing curbside services participation and availability rate, but also through a waste composition study to see how much yard waste we still have in the garbage stream where it shouldn't be. And then we want to promote that through the Level and Leave 'em program, meaning you want to leave your grass and leaves on your lawn as much as you can. I understand it might not be feasible for everything, but home composting is the second option. It will also save you money because you don't have to use that service in some cases. So those are some of the goals. So the second part of this is the marketing firm, and we have started to draft an RFP and some specifications where we haven't got to review it yet, and we feel like this needs to go back to the committee to take a look at. But the awarded contractor would aid our staff who already has a lot of knowledge in the solid waste system and a lot of education techniques. So they would supplement that, and we would make sure that whoever it is has an emphasis on those proven principles of community-based social marketing. So a lot of that is in the RFP that would go out. So the objectives for this RFP would be to design and promote Put Waste in Its Place campaign. And that goes further from there. Promote how materials collected in Louisville are processed, recycled, or recovered. Why do we want them to do that? Because a lot of people say it just goes to the landfill anyway. And we want to get away from that. We want people to know that it does get recovered here. We're combating a lot of national news. As we know, waste is very local. We want to promote the Recycle Coach app, which has a what goes where tool. Fits right in there. We want to promote the No Waste Ambassador program, and we want to promote the Love 'em and Leave 'em program. This is just a tip of the iceberg on what we need to do in this RFP, because we certainly want to do some anti-litter messaging. Some of the key elements that would be involved in this is creating television, radio, internet, print. You guys can see it. It was all in this document. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you can see that it's using just about all these different methods to get this message out. And at the end of it, I think it's not on here, but they need to be able to prove they're getting impressions on people, so that we can see that it's working. Of course, we're going to hopefully see it in our metrics too as well. These are some of the metrics that we currently have. This is the curbside recycling rate. As you can see, that's the one that we're sitting at 17.5%. Some of those rates are pretty low. And I think just by bringing up a couple, we could probably make a pretty significant impact. So this is a rate that we have tracked for many years. So we have a lot of historical data on it. This is the participation and availability rate, one that we don't necessarily, it's what we have to use for garbage. It doesn't work really well for recycling, and and households with yard waste, I don't believe, because we don't know how many are actually using it. And what's hard about that is not everybody recycles every time that it's recycle day to pick up. So you have to do it over a series of days. It's a hard thing to do. So we're looking for a way to do that. And you can see where we're sitting at 39.8. So we would prefer to see the yard waste service go down, and the recycling one go up. Yeah.
Pete, don't all the new recycling carts have some sort of RFID or something in the handle?
It does.
Is there any way that the trucks could be mounted with a reader and it would just record which ones were, or how many were out at the curb when you came through, so you wouldn't have to do so much, staffing?
Yes, it's a matter of getting those readers in place. The first step is getting the carts, and we've so far we've spent probably about 1.4 million in the urban services district, and we probably need to spend another 3 million at least to be able to get full distribution. And then we can make sure that we have the readers. I think that that'll be part of the next grant cycle, is try to get those readers on there. Now, I would ask the private companies if they have these readers on their vehicles and in their carts, if that would be a way that they could give us information on participation for some of these services. I'm sure it's going to be different for each hauler, but that might be something. I don't know, Bruce, is that something that you can kind of approach the private side to see if that is data that they do get, and whether they would share that?
Pete, I would be happy to inquire to our company about their ability here to do that. There's some things that it's best that you kind of champion when it comes to communicating the technologies of other companies.
Understood. So we'll get more into that, but that's really not the purpose of this presentation. So we'll get into more detail on it. This is the existing and proposed measurables. This is data from the Recycle Right program, and we'll get a little bit more into that here in just a little bit. But this is basically, we showed significant improvement where we've done these taggings, and it does reduce contamination significantly. So this is the capture rate, which I'll explain a little bit more. A capture rate is different than a recycling rate. And the study actually kind of mentioned this 90 by 90 by 42, 90% of people participating, recovering 90% of recoverable material. That's the really important part of that by 2042. So in this regard, you see a house, they generate 2,000 pounds. 1,200 pounds of that is true trash. 800 pounds of it is recyclable. They pick up 400 pounds of recyclables at the curb. So that means that we have a capture rate of 50% of the capturable recyclables. Whereas if you was to display this in a recycling rate, it would be actually sitting at 20%. So there's a big difference between a capture rate and a recycling rate. And the capture rate can be broken down into individual commodities. So here's an example of using a capture rate to improve, using education to improve what you're getting at the curb. This was in Denver, and they did after a capture rate study, they looked at trying to recover more aluminum cans. And our rate in the study for capture of aluminum cans was an abysmal 25%. Very, very low. So Denver, after they did their campaign, they went from 47% capture rate to a 59% capture rate. That's big. That's a big jump. So it's a 25% increase. A lot of that, 4 of it came from cans that were previously going into the trash. That's new recyclables. 8% came from cans that were previously put in the bags. That's what we're talking about, trying to get people not to put their recyclable in bags so it's more easily recovered. So that's one example of how you can use a capture rate to get your material. Here's another one in Atlanta. They did a high income and a low income survey for their capture rate because it's different. And I would suggest that we do that here. It's just, there's different demographics. There's a lot of different factors as to how things change. So you can see, and what they were trying to do is get people not to bag their recyclables. They went from, in group A, they had 20% of the material was in bags, and 16% of it was other contamination. They went to 5% in bags to 7% other contamination. So it was a very big improvement. And it's similar, but quite a bit different in your percentages for group B. So targeting your education based upon a capture rate study is very effective at being able to improve your recycling stream. I mean, when you're talking about cans, that is something that's the most valuable thing that's in your curbside stream. So with that said, this is what the staff is recommending after this presentation. We want to send the document that we sent to you today back to the subcommittee for a final review. Unless you guys say, hey, we love it, let's just adopt it tonight. But we feel like maybe it'll probably go back to subcommittee. The second would be to have the advisory committee make a commitment tonight to support at the next 109 board meeting funding for the full Recycle Right program. And I'm going to do a little bit of a presentation on that just after this. And then the last thing we want is to review a draft RFP for our marketing firm contract at the next residential C&D subcommittee meeting. So those are the things that we're asking tonight. Let me jump to the other presentation. Here, Karen, do you want to take this one? Because this is basically your education's program.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. So you tell me when you want me to change. And this is going to be our funding request to the 109 board.
Sure. Do you want to hit the button to where it's fuller screen for us?
Yes.
I know I've talked to you guys about the Recycle Right program before. So this is just a full-on presentation with some results and with the intention of moving it forward to request funding from the board. We lost it, Pete. Are you working on that, or did you want me to do it?
I'm working on it. You guys have the right screen?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, good.
So the Recycle Right program, which may not keep that name, but for now, that's what it's called, is intended to reduce the contamination in the waste stream through a curbside survey of waste containers. And we use an education-based tagging system that gives citizens feedback in real time, right there on their container. We'll be able to do this in any community throughout the county. As far as cities and homeowners associations and waste haulers, we could do areas upon request. And the first area of focus would be on the recycling stream. And so we did this as staff, the current staff we have, mostly Diane and Jessica Turner, one of our solid waste officers, and I, along with some of our No Waste Ambassador volunteers. We did this program in 3 different neighborhoods, Deer Park, Southside, and Shawnee. We did see a reduction in contamination of some of the materials that we looked for, and you'll see a picture of a tag in a few minutes. And we did follow-up surveys after, about 4 months after, just to see if the education stuck. So we are ready to move forward with this program. So the basic procedures here is picking a survey area, and with our little staff, we had to pick we picked areas that had about 100 participating households. So some of the areas were larger with low participation, but that we felt we roughly could survey about 100 containers. And we did speak to our Metro Council representatives through email, just to kind of share that we wanted to do this program, shared the letter ahead of time that we would send to the residents. We did a pre-audit in these areas, mostly because it was a brand new program and we really needed to see what we would be up against to help us determine which contaminants we would look for and things like that. So we set our date for our first tagging. We mailed an announcement letter to each household. And in our pilot area in the Southside neighborhood, we picked that particularly because of there being a lot of language barriers. So we worked with the Councilwoman Nicole George to pick certain languages and had that letter in multiple languages other than just Spanish, knowing what the area has, what kind of languages are spoken in that area. We do have to coordinate with the collection staff to make sure that they don't collect the recycling before we get a chance to look at it. And then you can, we would conduct that first survey and tag. We also used an app to keep the data easily would download into Excel. So we have some data. And then once you're done, we have to tell the collector that it's okay to come through and collect, and of course they need to know the procedures, because the way we did ours, some of those containers would not be collected. So we have to make sure they know that. And then we repeated that 2 more times, 3 times in Shawnee, but we did either 3 taggings or 4 taggings. And then we did send some follow-up information out, depending on the area, to the council people, to neighborhood associations. Some are stronger than others, but that's part of it, is trying to give people feedback. This was our announcement letter, so we wanted everybody to know what to expect. So of course, this letter might change if our procedures change in any way based on our pilot, but we want people to realize when they see, if they happen to look out the window and notice people looking in their recycling, they have the heads up of what's going on. So we can move on, Pete, because the tag shows those. So this is what our tags looked like in our pilot. We didn't really, not knowing what was going to happen as far as the future, we didn't put a whole lot of money into this. We just printed these on our own. We didn't make them into, well, we couldn't do cart hangers because at the time we still had a lot of bins. So we just used tape. Green, way to know, is basically saying, great job, we saw no problems. Yellow, you need some improvement. Red was completely unacceptable, and those are the ones our crew would look for to not collect in recycling trucks. We made sure it had English and Spanish, pictures as well as words, and we're trying to keep some of our images consistent throughout different publications. So that's a little closer look of a red tag. It was that basically we used those if the container was full of trash. maybe a lot of large items. It's just not being used appropriately as a recycling container at all. And in some cases, we asked the garbage crew to come through and collect it to get it empty, especially if we had interaction with the resident so that we could talk to them about how they're really supposed to use that container. The yellow tag, we did have our recycling crews go ahead and collect from these containers, but we wanted the resident to see the feedback of what not to do. But the reason behind that is because if we didn't have it collected, we were kind of afraid that the resident would end up just having to move some of the stuff over to the garbage. So in this case, the majority of the material is recyclables. There just might be some styrofoam in there. There might be some plastic bags, wrap, things like that, but it wasn't just garbage. And then, of course, the way to know tags are giving the positive reinforcement of the behavior of recycling in a good way. So if there weren't any issues, they got that. And on the back of every tag, it showed what we want people to recycle. Even the way to know tag had the, like, thanks for recycling these, and listed that there. So we have drafted a job description about if we're able to move forward with this program. We would like to pay staff to do this. It would be part-time staff. And I don't know, Pete, how much you want to get into that job description there, but
yeah, we basically, and it's not a final job description because it has to go through CNC, class and compensation with HR, but we wanted to make it very simple job description that would give people a really good idea. The people that we're going to try to attract is somebody that maybe is retired, or they are avid at wanting to do things like this, and we're wanting to pay them very well. So we want to make it pretty clear as to what we're asking for them to do, because we want to keep the staff that we're going to get. So we don't have that much training and turnover.
And this is the estimated cost proposal. So we have the personnel required, just an estimate of how many weeks, the printing costs, mailing costs. We would like a vehicle so that they can do this, specifically a hybrid. So it depends on the area. We had some areas that we walked. The South Side neighborhood, we actually drove. We would keep a car with us because you just kind of have to see the map, but it was a lot easier to do it that way. But this shows an estimated cost of the program. This is an expandable program. Like we said, we've only piloted it for the recycling containers, but it could be done looking for maybe yard waste within a garbage cart, looking at dumpsters, yard waste containers, any waste stream. We can modify the program. And when it goes to the board, this will be the request. These are some charts of results. This was the Deer Park neighborhood results. So the charts that we put in this shows basically we did a first tagging. So it was like the first time they ever saw feedback. We did the final one in the Deer Park neighborhood. We only did 3 taggings and we did them every other week. At the time we had weekly recycling. So it was every other collection. And then a follow-up 4 months later. So the Deer Park residents actually improved even more after 4 months of us not communicating with them. As far as the contaminants, the bagged recyclables went down every time, even after, even through the follow-up. You can see the plastic bags had a drastic jump down. Styrofoam went up and then came down. So I don't know. The South Side neighborhood, we did see a reduction after we had, you know, this engagement program. But then after 4 months, it had we saw an increase back up. And same with some of the contaminants. You can just kind of see the results there. It definitely showed us that having an active engagement and outreach to a neighborhood really helped. But if we're quiet for a while, sometimes old habits can come back. And in some cases it's hard to tell if the residents are the same.
Yeah.
You know, there may be turnover. And then for the Shawnee neighborhood, that was a challenge. I don't know how many of you have walked the alleys in Shawnee lately, but it definitely was different as far as the trash going on and the litter that's there. And we did see a reduction in yellow and red tags, so that was great. It did go back up after in our follow-up, but not as high as it had started at. And we saw similar results with the contaminants there too, where it kind of goes back up after we don't talk to them for a while. I think that might be it. Pete, is that it?
That is it. So one of the things that I would like to point out after Karen and talking about that follow-up continuous education is part of that campaign to put waste in its place and amplifying that message. You know, we're hitting the target here, but if we can amplify this message over a much broader area, we get better results even. So that, you know, that's what that marketing campaign could help us do, is amplify the message of what we're trying to do here.
Hey, Pete, this is Pat. Just a quick point of order. I was on a Zoom call from 4 to 5 with a client. At 5:01, I joined this committee meeting. Can I be counted as in attendance?
We'll count you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Karen, this is Bruce. Did you get any input from the recycling partnership on this?
I don't know that I have shared results from them, but they know that we have this, that we piloted this program, and the grant that we received to get those recycling carts included us having some sort of program like this. So I know they were pleasantly maybe surprised and glad that we already had a program in place that was at least piloted. So we were a little bit ahead of the game on that. But no, not specifically as far as results or anything, but I did use some of their graphics for the tags.
It's good. We have done whoops tags in Columbus, Ohio, and in Cincinnati with the partnership, and it's really helped the quality and the volume collected within those communities.
That's great.
So I guess the question, you know, this really kind of concludes our presentation tonight on this, and I hope you guys can see the benefit of the Recycle Right program first and foremost, but also a little bit more about where we're trying to head with our education and marketing to be able to amplify this message. So now that Karen and I have presented, we are interested in feedback, and we're interested in, primarily in that number 2 right there, and the committee's support at the next 109 board meeting for the funding for this program. Now we're going to listen.
Can we flip back to the fund or the cost page, Pete?
Yes. I think we can. I can figure out where it's at. You have it? Nope. 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 Can you guys see the cost page?
You haven't
We're
shared
not
at all.
sharing yet.
Not sharing it. Okay.
We see your desktop screen.
Yep. Don't know why it's not pulling up. Hang on a second. That.
There we go.
Okay.
So 132,872 for year one, and then annual support of $99,072 after first year.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Is that for 4 people,
Yes.
4 part-time people?
4 part-time people. And we do have it at a rate of $24 an hour, and hopefully that's going to include benefits. Because we're going to try to attract some people. 16 hours a week, so 4 days and 32 weeks out of the year. Some parts of the year, if we have people that are out there doing this, we don't want them to be out in the middle of the cold, in the snow and stuff like that. So there may be some breaks in there.
What kind of benefits are you going to give them? Or are you proposing?
I think that that's going to have to come from our CNC. They're going to have to stick to standard Metro on that. So we'll be working with them once we can kind of get an approval. But whatever it is, we don't want the rate to be over $24 an hour if that's what we're going to set. If it turns out to be more than that, we may come back to the board and say, hey, we underestimated the cost. Would you approve the cost increase on the hourly rate?
So when you're talking about benefits, you're talking about like health benefits or something of that nature. You're not
Yes.
talking about enrolling them in a pension plan.
Correct. Correct. We're not talking about the pension system. Now, I'm saying that, but I know enough about it, Sandra, to get myself in trouble. I don't want to do that. So take everything I'm saying about the pays and the compensation with a degree of salt. So maybe it brings up a point that I need to get a little bit more information before next week's board meeting.
Actually, the reason I asked that question is we did a survey, another council member and myself, and we did not find any of these cities that we surveyed. Metro was not one of them. We did not find any of them giving benefits to part-time employees. So your thought here is interesting.
If that's what Metro is doing, if they are giving benefits or if they're not giving benefits, if they are, I think that would be something that we should definitely do. I don't know that we would have any choice but to. But if they're not, we're going to be sticking with what is really the policy here at Metro.
Why did you pick 16 hours a week instead of 20?
Um, 2 days, I guess. That's
It's a good question. Looking at a lot of people that do part-time work, I think it would be a little bit more appealing. And I still think that we get our goal achieved by this program. I'm just worried about attracting and being flexible with people. You know, it may be that we have one person that is a crew leader that would come in on that 5th day just to do planning. And have it as a planning day to get mailings together and stuff like that. So I'm not saying that we wouldn't have one person working 20 hours, but we don't want to tax existing staff with a whole lot more work, because we got so many things that we need to work on right now. But we'll work that part out.
And the time frame for an employee doing this work has to be in the morning, so they can't really work a full day tagging containers if we expect the crews to be able to those containers later.
I understand. So this actually, you're asking for support of the whole proposal, and this is only one component of it that may end up looking different once you've done more research.
I'm not sure that I understand. We're not looking for an approval of the marketing campaign for recycling and composting.
Yeah,
Right?
no, that isn't what I meant. But when you're talking about taking something to the board, the something is really the advisory committee's support of the entire proposal, different components of which may look a little bit different by the time you're ready to implement it.
True. Yes.
Okay.
Well, you asked if we have our support, and you have my support. There are a few of your slides that I would clarify some of the information, because when I looked at them, I kept thinking, does he mean this or does he mean that? And that just slows your audience down to hearing what you have to say, because a literate audience will always read before they listen anyway. So if that's what you're dealing with, I would like to see the slides have a little bit more clarity, so that when people are reading instead of listening to you, they at least get the clear information.
Understood and appreciated. I think that we can send this presentation to the committee, and any suggestions that you guys may have, as long as it's not going to change the content of what we're trying to do here. I still think that this committee could vote to support the staff's recommendation to the board.
I agree with you.
I have a question. What was sent to us, was it yesterday or today by Karen? Is that the exact same as this? This presentation looks a little different. So we have a copy of that to look through. What's the differences between what we were sent and what was presented here? Like, it's PowerPoint versus slides, I guess, but or I don't know. I'm not sure.
One was the full recommendation for a marketing campaign for recycling and composting for residential properties. This is just this presentation here that talks about the Recycle Right program is just a component of that.
So is there this is probably a Sandra question, but is there some sort of language that we could incorporate into a resolution to give Pete the support that we want, but recognizing that he's going to have to flesh out a few more things by talking to compensation and maybe clarifying some stuff?
I think you just made a motion, Sarah, and it sounded good to me.
Well, okay, there you go. Did somebody catch it?
It's on recording.
Okay.
We have a motion by Ms. Cunningham. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Second by Ms. Leonard. Any additional comments or from committee members?
Just the one again. What is going to be presented to the 109 board? The slides, the presentation that Pete just gave us, or the email that we got a day ago or so?
I think neither. What Pete's saying is this is the latest edition we just saw, but he's still refining it. So it will be something akin to it, what we saw today, but it probably won't be what we saw today, right, Pete?
Yes, it'll be this exact presentation that you're talking with the changes.
So it's the presentation you gave us is what you're going to give them. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, because the other one is broader and we haven't finished with it yet.
Got it. Thank you. Yes.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Those in favor, vote aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys very much.
Will you guys send out a tightened up version of it to the committee members? Once you get some of those clarifications, Karen?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the construction C&D recycling. Is that correct, Pete?
Let me get back to that one. Yes, it would be the ICI Self-Haul Subcommittee report, which was the committee that just met just a little bit ago. Here's one of our dilemmas for this committee, is you guys meet right before it.
Right.
We have no time to do a presentation.
Correct.
So
yeah.
If you guys consider moving your meeting back 1 week, we are still virtual, then it gives us a little bit more time to prepare. But in lieu of that, if Greg, as that committee chair, wants to make a presentation and other members want to chip in and staff chip in, we can do that.
Yeah, I thank you for that. Yes, I don't know how to handle that about moving. I guess that's, should we do that to an email to just the ICI Self-Haul members to see if they're willing to move the meeting to the 1 week up to the following?
I think we can do that at the next meeting.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I thank you. I agree. I never have time to prepare anything, so I can just give a brief talk, and anybody else that wants to add in, I'm more than welcome that, including staff or people that were there. I think two new things that happened was Bruce Blue, I'm sorry, sent an email, and we discussed it at the ICI subcommittee, but it also went to everybody on the 109 board and all the other participants, like 50 to 100 people. So I don't know if we want to discuss that now also or not. We discussed it, thought it was a good idea, but we haven't done anything to it or implemented it.
Greg, I think that we can probably break down what our discussion was at that committee for the people that wasn't there.
Okay. Later, I mean another date, right? Or now?
No, right now.
Right now?
Just briefly. I mean, if you want staff to do that, we can do that.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I'll say the other thing is then also what I thought was important things. Bruce Burrow suggested that we visit the Monroe County, Indiana sorting facility. And we all agreed that would be a great idea. We agreed it's a little bit different than us. It's a smaller county, but they also are doing a very good job, apparently, what they do. So I think there's going to be 3 or so dates proposed, and we're talking about everybody trying to go there. We can, but with COVID, we're talking about probably separate cars and also virtual. Hopefully somebody's going to videotape it to show to everybody.
And I don't think sorting facility will be heard by this group like we mean it, because most people will probably hear MRF, but it means a facility where citizens bring their stuff and they sort it out. Right, Bruce?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Helpful.
So I wanted to get that in, but now we can go back to what Bruce Blue's letter was, and I'll let maybe you guys staff want to discuss it, what you thought we were.
Well, the recommendation that we're talking about is the self-haul recommendation at the moment, and that is residentially hauled waste from their residence. So they would bring that in a pickup truck or their SUV or on a small trailer. And then we're talking primarily about residential material. And the recommendation was that there would be drop-off capabilities at each disposal site that there are in Jefferson County, so that a customer can pull in, they can offload their recoverable materials and then place the rest of it in with the landfill material. The idea that we would recover more material. The study did find that only 7% of self-haul waste is recovered at this time. And they felt like that with something like this recommendation, that recovery rate could go up to, and I can't remember exactly, 40 to 45%. So 40 to 45% of a fairly small number, but it is still diversion. So Bruce, we've been going back and forth, and some of the issues that we have talked about is space. We've talked about liability. We talked about cost. And one of the solutions proposed by Bruce Blue was that the Waste District or Metro open a facility specifically for self-haul that we could be supported by the private companies or through the Waste District and use that in lieu of having these drop-off facilities at disposal facilities. So that kind of turned into, well, let's go look at Monroe to see how they do it, so we can kind of get a little bit of a better idea about how other people are doing it. So the committee has kind of placed it on a little bit of a hold so that we can continue to gather information on it to determine where we want to go. Did that do a fairly decent job of summarizing the discussion?
I think
With the exception that Bruce is going to try to get some dates out into the future when we might be able to go.
So I will call the director and try to establish some dates that would work for them that may be acceptable to the committee.
We were smart. We have an opportunity to make the Western Hemisphere a.
somebody's got a TV going.
I think it's Bruce Blue.
Pete, I wanted to say that on the agenda, there was a thing about updating about the C&D, which was still under the residential C&D subcommittee. And I didn't know if you wanted to share any of that. You gave a short update at the last meeting last week.
Sure, we're still working on the C&D process, and you know, we're focusing on 3 different materials. One is shingles into road asphalt. One is concrete, and the other one is drywall. We quickly on the shingles, we're working with the state, or we're working with Bluegrass testing labs, and they test asphalt mixes. They are going to be putting together a suggested mix or whatever, so that we can start to promote that mix. And of course, we need to get a lot of people, the different asphalt manufacturers, to agree. But one of the biggest concerns is cracking. And the state DOT kind of started to frown upon shingles. But what we found out was it wasn't necessarily, it was just too much shingle that was going into there, which caused that cracking. Asphalt shingles, according to Bluegrass Testing Labs, does not increase cost, and it does not compromise quality whatsoever. So we're working on that. The other part was concrete, and we are working, I have been working a little bit with Adam on trying to nail down how much concrete and stuff that's generated by governmental agencies as part of the LEED for Cities program. Louisville did receive LEED for Cities silver certification, which was great. And as part of that certification, we need to start tracking our construction and demolition debris that's coming from infrastructure projects. So we're hoping to kind of use that as a jumpstart to get to C&D processing. And the last one was drywall. And myself, Karen, Matt Smith, and Diane, we met with the University of Kentucky and the Soil Conservation District about drywall recycling. And, you know, it's coming down to that one particular clean drywall is probably what we want. It has definitely a use and it can be, but there are some obstacles of odor, which working on some solutions for that. Could be a microbe that could be injected at the same time it's processed, and it goes into compost really well.
What's the odor? Sulfur or more, something else?
I think it was a sulfur.
Okay.
So
It's generally hydrogen sulfide.
Okay.
yeah,
Thank
Matt is going to work with looking into some situation, but he could talk to a little bit more about the committee. And this meeting with them took place after our last subcommittee meeting. And then the state feels like that there's some interest there. There's some potential, but we're in the very early stages of looking at the potential for it to be a sole amendment, which would include any kind of permitting requirements or anything like that. Might not even be required, but to see, you know, the application of it, there is some documentation out there that it can help capture phosphorus from leaching into streams. If that's the case, I mean, it's a pretty big deal. But you know, there's a lot of skepticism about that, and it would have to be tested and piloted and looked at with some studies. So in short, that's where we're at on construction and demolition material.
Thank you, Pete.
Mm-hmm.
cool.
With that, I believe the next item on the agenda, does that wrap up your presentation, Pete?
Yes. So the next one is the National Waste and Recycling Association.
Could I just finish something on the CNI, ICI and South Hall? I wanted to add quickly that we did get some input from other members that were on Zoom, both I think some apartment people and condo people, and I don't know if they were with different cities. So we are going to take some of that into account also. So there was some participation from the public that we are also getting feedback from. Okay.
Good, thank you, Greg. All right, next up, we have Andy Reynolds, who's going to give suggestions and recommendations for achieving some attainable goals from the National Waste and Recycling Association. Andy, you're on deck.
Yeah, and I have, there's a very brief PowerPoint presentation. Pete, is it okay if I share my screen, or is that?
Absolutely.
Sure. So let me.
Yep.
You know if that shows up okay?
Got it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. NWRA is consisting of all of the haulers and recyclers and in the country essentially, and we have a Kentucky chapter. I want to keep this as brief as I can. I respect everybody's time. I know we've got about 15 minutes left, and I don't want to take up any more time than is useful. And a lot of this actually Pete has spoken to, possibly without knowing it, earlier in this meeting, and then some in the ICI and South Hall subcommittee meeting before. So let me see that just all of the information from this is actually taken from the solid waste plan. Most of it is from the executive summary. Just a reminder, and Pete brought this up earlier, we talk a lot about the 90% diversion goal, but that's a little bit of an oversimplification. As he mentioned before, it is actually a 90% participation and 90% diversion of recoverable materials. And I only say that to point out that there are two different ways to move that number, right? As we continue to develop technology and the ability to recover additional material. If we don't increase our diversion rate, then that number, our overall diversion rate goes down. But if we only focus on diversion without looking to expand what is recoverable, we run up against a cap that currently, and you'll see this on the next slide. The waste characterization studies showed that only about 62% of the material that is currently being landfilled is recoverable right now. So we really need to focus on both sides of that equation. And also just sort of a refocusing on what was recommended by the study. It focuses on a start in 2016 and then basically a decision point after 10 years. So everything we do up until 2026, 2028, however we want to frame it, because I know the study took a little bit longer than we expected, is basically set up to get us to that decision point of how we deal with things over the next 16 years, or the second 16 years of that study. So I think a lot of what we're focused on the subcommittee level is appropriate, and a lot of what was presented today, expanded service, waste reduction and education, all of those things, the Love 'em and Leave 'em program, the Recycle Right program, all of that stuff is, I mean, I commend the city for doing that. That is very labor intensive, but really important work, which I'm sure they were waiting for my approval on, but but no, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we have seen work in a lot of other places as well. So I think everybody's on the right track on that. And then limited regulation while preserving choices. We'll get into that a little bit here in just a little bit. Moving on to the next slide, this is just sort of reframing what I mentioned before. 90% diversion is not the goal. Just saying that it's 90% diversion of recoverable material, 90% participation. And then reiterating what the diversion rates were when the study was done in 49, at 49% in 2016. So unless we actually focus on increasing what is considered recoverable, then the most that we can actually divert right now is about 70%. So there's no path to 90% diversion without increasing what is considered recoverable. Which again, Pete is talking about that with some of the programs, trying to find ways to use asphalt or use shingles in asphalt and things like that can find uses for materials that currently don't have a use.
Clarifying question, please, Andy.
Yeah.
When you refer to it as recyclable, do you mean parenthetically at current market rates, or what you can get on the tipping floor, or do you mean physically we just don't have the technology?
It's either physically we don't have the technology, or we do not have a demand for that material or a beneficial use for that material in this area. So it's not that part when it's considered recoverable is not focusing on the economic aspect of it, right? If there is a use for it, whether it costs more to dispose of or less, it's considered recoverable if there is a beneficial use for it.
That's a helpful clarification. Thank you.
And that's why I wanted to make sure that any of the information and the statistics that come from either in this are directly from the solid waste report that was done for the city, not from outside sources where you can't go back and refer to the context around the data that's being provided. So next right here, just, again, exactly what Pete had mentioned before. We've got two big areas of focus right now. We've got self-haul. There's the 7% diversion rate that he mentioned. And residential are the two big areas, or the two areas with the lowest percentages of diversion. Just wanted to point out that in 2015, the residential portion was about 3 times the size of self-haul. So not that we don't need to worry about self-haul, but the biggest bang for the buck, both monetarily and in terms of effort, is going to be on the residential side, which I think is something that you're seeing with the Recycle Right program. You can, with a little bit of education and some effort and increasing the availability and the capacity for recycling, you can see a lot of movement quickly and getting the correct materials out of the waste stream. And again, if anybody else has any questions or concerns, I know I'm trying to fly through this a little bit, so please slow me down or redirect me if needed. So what the focus on the short term, again, this is just going back to what the study recommendations are, which I don't need to rehash here because I know everybody has talked about them ad nauseum and all of the subcommittee meetings. But some things that I think we can lose sight of in those conversations is scaling up implementation of pilot programs, which again, talking about Recycle Right, Love 'em and Leave 'em, and a couple of other different things. These are pilot programs that the city is already either using or trying to implement. Those things are great and expandable. and then developing incentives for waste reduction. I think that that's going to play into the next slide here. I believe it's the next slide. The more that we this before I get into the discussion of it, over on the right hand side, this is the EPA's food recovery hierarchy, just used as an example. So when it's showing is the most preferred means of reuse for material, obviously landfill or incineration is the very bottom of that. What that means is that's not only the least preferred method for disposal, which is why we have a landfill ban on yard waste, but the farther down the chain that we go, the farther down the waste stream that we go, the less impact or the more effort for the same impact we get. So by the time material is at the waste facility or has already gotten into the waste stream, the harder it is to get it out and the less of the material you're going to be able to get out. So just called out a couple of those things on the left hand side. I know there had been discussion about a potential anaerobic digester in town several years ago. I'm not trying to let off any political bombs or anything in the advisory committee meeting, but just showing that is industrial uses are considered a better use than composting, which is considered a better use for landfill or incineration. But at the top of that list is not wasting food in the first place, or things like home composting, which I know that is another pilot program that the city is talking about expanding. So trying to keep that material from having to have a truck come pick it up to drive it, burning other fossil fuels, or using even electric power that has to come from somewhere, which in Kentucky right now is still fossil fuel based. All of that we can reduce is going to have a greater impact than trying to pull stuff out of the, basically as it's being dumped onto the ground, trying to grab it out of the back of the truck. So one of the things that we would like to see, as an industry, is incentives created, regardless of sector, for reducing the amount of material entering the waste system in the first place. And that's something that the 109 board and Metro Louisville have the ability to do that no one else does, just because of the nature of those bodies. Whether it's a legislative solution or an ordinance solution, we've seen those work in a lot of cities. Anything from, if you're talking about, Pete again mentioned using shingles in asphalt projects. The city has a grading system when awarding contracts to bidders, either providing points for use of a certain threshold of recovered material, or requiring that they have a solid waste plan for the material that they use on a construction project or on a road project. Things like that have been very successful. Right now, when it's what we've seen in some other cities right now who are going through this exact same conversation. I deal with the city of Nashville a lot. They're walking through this exact same process, about a year behind the city of Louisville. Right now, the only construction, they have a 1% diversion rate for C&D material. And that's because it is entirely up to, the kindness of people's hearts. If they have a lead project, hey, that's great. I want to engage in this recycling program. But if you incentivize people to use those programs, then we've seen a lot of success in diverting material and keeping it out of the waste stream in the first place. So a couple of, and this is going broader than just C&D, a couple of industry recommendations, and some of these things are things that we're asking that the city do, but that the industry is committed to doing as well. Metro Code 51-300 right now requires any hauler to provide collection options for recycling, but it does not specify the size of container that has to be used. The industry would like to see a recommendation that any recycling that is offered, the minimum capacity that is offered, should be cart based. So basically eliminating, not eliminating, but moving from a requirement to offer just bin service to requiring that cart-based services be required. So doing that would increase the residential capacity, minimum capacity per week, from 9 gallons right now to 48 gallons. I know the city is already doing that the industry doing that outside of the urban services district is between a $5 million and a $7.5 million commitment from the industry to do that. It would greatly increase the amount of material recycled, and it would be done for people who are already choosing to recycle, who right now are having to put material that they want to have recycled into the trash because there's just not enough space in their recycle bin or in their
And
recycle cart.
If we
Yes.
did that, would we soon see a proposal to go to every other week collection?
Well, right now the requirement on the code is every other week collection of recycling.
Did we
So
actually
that's the
encode that, or is it just something we're allowing when people ask?
that is the code as it's written. That's the very top bullet point right there. A minimum of once every other week collection of recyclables is what is in the code right now.
Okay.
And I would say right now, I mean, that does not preclude people from having weekly recycling collection. I think the biggest concern right now from industry is just the ability of the hauling companies to collect every week. I know, and some of it is short term, but we're not sure how long. The short term has been going on for about 2 years now. With COVID, I know, Metro just had to suspend yard waste collection, which is hopefully short term and, the perfect time of year to suspend that. Not a lot of yard waste happening, right now. But the ability of haulers to hire drivers and tippers to be able to get yard waste there weekly with larger containers is difficult right now. But we have competitively bid contracts, especially that are still going to demand weekly recycling collection.
Thank you.
And then another thing that we have down here is expanded industry support for satellite self-haul drop-off events. And that is, I think the recommendation and the offer from industry is not contingent upon it being just satellite self-haul drop-off. There was some discussion earlier in the ICI committee meeting about having sort of like surge events at some of the staffed recycling centers, to have events where on a given week or weekend that some of the larger events be held in sites that already have material that's coming in. The industry can support that with anything from staffing to trucks to containers. I know, I work for Waste Management. Waste Management has been providing free hauling of all of the unmanned recycling drop-off material for quite a while now. That's an artifact of the old host agreement, but we're not, I'm not saying this to toot Waste Management's horn, but that is not required still, but we're not going to stop doing that. I mean, that's something that we're committed to continuing to do. And I think that, the industry has committed to supporting that in other forms as well, not just the commingled large roll-off containers that you see over at Bowman Field and other places like that.
Andy, I would say that the agreement is that, the old agreement was that you guys do that for the staffed recycling centers. We provide, Metro provides it for all the unstaffed recycling centers.
Sorry. Yeah, I misspoke. I flipped it accidentally. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No problems.
And then part of this, again, a lot of this has already been stated, creating incentive programs for waste reduction, and ways that Metro can help. And a lot of this you're already doing or trying to ramp up, as part of this process. Incentivize or require the use of recovered materials in city contracted construction and road projects. And then working with the industry to create commodity markets for what is not currently recoverable. So, there's a tendency to focus on just trying to get things out of the waste stream right now without an endpoint in mind or an endpoint in place. And I think we need to focus a little bit on creating demand before we create supply on some of this stuff. And I think, again, that's part of what Public Works is already trying to do. And that's going to require support above the level of the 109 board, even if you're talking about legislative or Metro code changes. But I think there will be support for that. We just need to, to raise awareness of the need for that in order to really move the needle on what's considered recoverable and divertible. Sorry, I went over by 1 minute. I apologize.
Does that
Thank
conclude?
you, Andy. Any questions for Andy?
And it does, and I'm sorry. I know that didn't leave much time for questions, but if anybody would like a copy of this or anything else, let me know, and I can send it over to Pete for dissemination. And
I think you should send it to everybody, or send it to Pete to send to everybody.
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I'll send it to Pete if that's okay, and then Pete can send it out to everybody.
Yeah, we
I
would
don't want to
want
sign Pete up for something, but
we want to keep it as a record of what took place
sure,
today.
yeah.
Please keep it on the website. Please put it up on the website.
If we got a minute, I just wanted to ask a couple questions about the presentation.
No, absolutely.
One was about the cart-based. What percentage of the private haulers currently use small bins?
I don't know the exact answer to that. I know Waste Management still does. That's something that we're committed to changing. We are in the process right now of getting everyone switched over from that has a recycle bin over to a recycle cart. There are some holdouts from people that we have contracts with that want to stay with their small recycle bin. I think going forward we are going to provide recycle carts or not provide the option for bins going forward, but that's a Waste Management decision, not a that doesn't impact the rest of the NWRA members.
Okay.
I would say Rumpke as well. We do both, Pete. We have the 18-gallon bins as well as, I would say probably 50% or greater with the cart-based systems.
Okay.
And Waste Management is nowhere near 50% on that. We are probably at 10% cart-based right now.
Wow. Andy, I got so involved in listening, I forgot about the front. Is there an ask that you had? And maybe you better repeat it if you did.
No, there's no ask really, other than just to say that this is what we as an industry have seen work in other places. I mean, other cities, just like the model cities that that have been used in the recommendations, and a lot of those cities, Waste Management or Republic is the hauler, for that city, or operates in those cities under those guidelines, and just trying to reiterate what we've seen be successful. And I know that there's been a concern that you stated earlier about getting pushback against certain things or not seeing things done. I know that has been, we've seen a lot of pushback on one specific item. I don't want that to color the interpretation of where the industry is coming from on this. We're supportive of this plan and the desire to move the diversion needle up and move it up as quickly as possible. But we've seen some things that have been effective other places, and seen things that have been tried that have not worked. And we're just trying to sort of give our expertise as far as that's concerned, for how we can move this quickly.
Thank you.
And in a way that's palatable to as many people as possible while still being useful, right? Not so watered down that it's accepted by everybody that we increase diversion by 3% and say, good job, everybody.
Right.
Well, I would like to add, Andy, number one, thank you for the presentation. And based upon this presentation, it makes me feel like that we're actually a lot more together than maybe what it feels like. I think that a lot of the stuff that you presented it is things that we're working on, and I think that it could be expanded upon. So I do appreciate the conversation and the presentation, and feel like that, I felt today like we've actually moved a little bit closer to getting some stuff done, and I applaud that. So I do have some other stuff, but for time reasons and where we're at, that's all I've got. But thank you very much. I appreciate
Yeah, and Pete, when I send this over to you, feel free, if you still have questions, if you want to write them out, I can respond to them, and you can send it out with the with the presentation or whatever makes the most sense.
Sure. Thank you so much.
And I would like to propose that next month we get some sort of a report about how are we going to manage COVID, and for how long are we going to have to stop having services, because when the public goes too long without having something, they kind of forget about it and you start all over when you bring it back. Does that make any sense?
Can't wait to get there.
I know, it's just hoping doesn't seem to, it seems like wish cycling, you know. Really what I guess I want to know is, do we have to open up contract negotiations with the Teamsters in order to get them to get vaccinated so we can all get back to work? I don't know the answer, but I would like to know, because I'm getting asked about this and I don't know what to say to people.
I mean, I can't speak for the waste collection unit over there or the Teamsters or anything. I can tell you that I don't know anybody that hasn't either been vaccinated or had it. I don't know where we're going to be at in a month, but I don't know about everybody else in their personal lives or even at their work sites. It seems like everybody has gotten it in the past month. I don't know the answer to it. I just don't know the answer to it, Sarah Lynn. Hopefully, Omicron is going to be the end of it, or at least get us to an endemic phase of the pandemic.
I think it's just up to everybody to try to persevere and get to that point. I know we're running short on time, but I did want to open it up. Pete, if we have no board report, I wanted to open it up to see if anyone that's not on the committee has any comments. I know JD Gary made some comments at the last subcommittee meeting, and I believe Travis Yates may have. Are you on the call, Travis?
Travis is not, but this is JD. Travis had to jump off, but.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, just briefly, I just had a concern with the mandatory part of multifamily and recycling. And, I think there's some issues that needs to be addressed. And Pete asked that I reach out to him and we can discuss it, because Pete and I have discussed other issues as well. So I'll do that and we can, I kind of report back next meeting.
Thank you very much. We really want to involve all the stakeholders, JD, and I appreciate your input and working with Pete, because we have to have a solution that's good for all parties involved to get the best result. So thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to be heard at this time? Hearing none, and we'll go to the announcements. We're running a little bit over, but the next 109 board meeting will be Wednesday, January 26th, 5:30 to 7 p.m. The subcommittee meetings, residential/C&D, Tuesday, February 8th, from 2 to 3 p.m. And ICI Self Hall subcommittee meeting will be Wednesday, February 16th, 2:15 to 4:15. And our next advisory committee meeting will be Wednesday, February 16th, from 4:30 to 6 p.m. I guess at this point, that's all I have for this evening. Is there anybody else on the committee that has any other topics they want to discuss?
No, thank you.
Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I have a second.
Second.
Was that Sandra?
Yes, it was.
Thank you, Sandra. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. I wish you all safe journeys tonight, tomorrow morning. Be careful. Wear your masks and stay healthy. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bruce. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
all.